Hello, 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 and welcome to episode 1 of From the Ground Up. I'm Will, and this is Jos.
Hello, hello.
We're from Landstack, and this is sort of going to be a podcast talking about all things land, which is kind of what we know, hopefully, and just things that are relevant in the news at the minute regarding land, building, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge time in land and planning. So much is changing. So the government is being, quite aggressive with respect to lots of policy changes, and it's having a dramatic impact on sort of how the industry is progressing and all the sort of different pieces of land that will come forward. Massive changes happening. So and it's happening kind of consistently, month by month, week by week. We're seeing changes, all the time, and so we felt like it would probably be a good idea to put something like this together so we can kind of stay on top of things.
Yeah, and we do a lot of content filming, but I think we thought actually be great to sit down, have a chat, talk about sort of things that are going on. And where do you want to start in terms of?
Well, yeah, a lot of these topics are quite nuanced.
Yeah.
So it does take, sometimes, you want to try and take a little bit longer to get into things. I think the first thing is kind of what's on everyone's mind, which is basically what actually makes a site worth pursuing in 2026.
Yeah.
We've had quite a few changes in 2025 that have gone into law, but we've also got a lot of proposed changes from the government that has meant that potentially what actually makes a site worth pursuing is changing. And what I would say is you need to kind of be aware of what the current sort of planning landscape looks like, but how it's going to change. And obviously, we're very much on the case of trying to be on the front foot.
Yeah.
Trying to get
as much as possible.
Yeah, and trying to sort of take into account that this is where the landscape's moving, and take some examples of sort of the beginning of last year. We put out a big piece on 5-year housing land supply, and especially on the housing targets. We felt like that was a really big thing for 2025 from a strategic land point of view, because it meant that local authorities would have to change their housing figures. They would have to change their local plans, but getting in early was super important.
And I think we saw, especially from the changes at the start of the year, that took a while to actually hit planning applications generally.
Yeah.
And then also authorities who were tweaking their local plans to take into account housing numbers. For example, like the Cotswolds, latterly last year.
Absolutely.
A complete increase.
And that's the interesting thing, is the opportunity was there the whole year.
Yeah.
Like, it was going to happen. They had to change their housing numbers, but it felt like a lot of people got caught on the back foot where they went, oh my God, they've just allocated all this land, when they were going to have to do that anyway because of the housing numbers. So that's the sort of things we want to talk about, is to try and give people an idea about where they can go proactively this year to try and get the sort of same advantages that you could have had last year on the housing numbers. And you still could. I mean, that's one thing we should talk about.
I was going to say, I think we should probably start there, which is talking about housing numbers. Obviously, all of this is driven by the 1.5 million homes.
Yes, exactly.
And that's dictated a lot of basically policy.
Yeah.
Especially last year, going into this year, all that's talked about is that number. From my point of view, it's tiring to hear it kind of all the time. And I think it does impact. You can't have a set trend for all authorities. As we've talked about in sort of previous stuff, like authorities are very different. They've got different constraints, different things going on. So where do you think with the housing number, what do you think we should do with that in terms of, should it be something that should be tweaked? Should there be like a bit of a review of that?
Yeah. So in terms of like the overall general picture, obviously I think the vast majority of the industry thinks that we're not going to hit the number.
No.
And there's no chance of hitting the number. But obviously, put that to the side for a second. Almost the number is irrelevant. What the number causes is massive. It causes the allocation of a huge number of development sites. And I would almost certainly say the potential for a huge number of windfall sites as well, because it's very unlikely that the local authorities will get it right. Yeah. They're also having to rush through local plans. There's a new local plan process coming through this year. And the likelihood that every local authority gets it right is very low. And so it will mean that windfall sites will be, I just think will be a huge opportunity this year and next year and in the years coming.
When you say windfall site, what do you mean?
Windfall sites are essentially sites which haven't been allocated in a local plan. And are kind of outside of the local authority's plan, but because the local authority potentially aren't delivering on the local plan, so they've said we're going to build 10 here, 50 here, 100 here, 2,000 here, and turns out this site's undeliverable for this reason, can't get the funding to get this site forward, they need to put houses elsewhere, and that's when the market will take over and you can put an application in and you can say, 5-year housing land supply argument, you haven't hit your numbers, you should build this. And so, they're generally a bit more risky, quite speculative, but I do think that just due to the nature of the way the government's approached putting the housing numbers in and just kind of then letting it go, that will be a big consequence of everything that happens. Kind of couple that with the other changes that the government have suggested. So they've suggested land close to train stations is going to get automatic approval.
That was a more recent one that they...
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's kind of one that you'd bring into the start of this year, which is housing numbers coupled with that. Let's take a look at the Cotswolds, for example. They put a big load of allocations in and around the sort of southern part near the AONB. Kemble Station, for example, is a really interesting example of a site that could come forward and should come forward, because there's a huge amount of land to the west side of it. Maybe we can put up a bit of a explanation of it whilst we're talking about it. That is, I think it's actually been allocated in the plan. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah.
I don't think it has.
Yeah.
But I think the problem you've got at Kemble is it's crossing 2 authorities. So
which is
Cotswolds, Wiltshire. And as we know, the problem with planning generally is, it gets into the realms of councils, politics, those sorts of things. So I think the issue you may have there is crossing 2. So where does the...
No, I agree with you. I think it should be deliverable regardless, right? I mean, it will be, that one specifically will be more complex, but the general attributes that site has, I think, is a good indicator for what people should be looking at as low-hanging fruit. You really should be looking for local authorities that have a big housing number to hit, train stations which aren't necessarily that constrained. Those will be huge opportunities this year and next year.
Yeah, and I think the problem you've got, I mean, we use Cotswolds as a good example because obviously we live there, we're based there. But I think the issue you have, I think with a lot of sites there, is infrastructure. A lot of it is drainage, water authority, roads, all those sorts of bits, which the size of a place like the Cotswolds and Cirencester just can't take that volume. So you do have to then start looking elsewhere. And I agree with your argument that actually Kemble could take thousands of homes. It's out for far enough to not really be impacting any of the other.
And it's an hour to London.
Yeah.
Right? It's an hour to London. It's so well connected. If you put houses there, you won't need to necessarily get the car. You could walk or bike to the station. If you live in Ciren and you put an extension on Cirencester, you have to then get 10-15 minutes car to the train station. So it's just a no-brainer, honestly.
So that's probably a positive from the government side of things, is they are actually sort of thinking about these things. Things are changing, which is the big thing.
The difficulty is, if you want to change the planning system, it's just such a monstrosity, right? So big. So you do have to start somewhere. And I do think they started in the right place, which is you have to start first principles. Fundamentally, how many homes do we want to build? That's the target. So they've done the right thing starting there. But then obviously the reality is that everyone was complaining about housing numbers, saying they were too low, right? But that was almost like it's like the first dam they needed to get through. But there's then all that's done is then reveal all the other problems in the system. So I think that will be, you see all these other changes coming through. They are listening. It feels like, they're listening to what people, there's also a proposal for biodiversity get gain to be dropped on small sites. I think that's a contentious one, and one that, ideally B&G in principle, I support massively. I think it's a great idea. Whether the fact that it's had such a big financial impact on the sort of viability of those schemes is definitely something to address.
I think we from where we sit, from a Landstack perspective, is we kind of see all those different ends of the spectrum. From your big PLC house builder to your smaller one-man bands, but also your SMEs. And I think we're seeing definitely a squeeze on the SMEs. And, on calls we were on and things like that, a lot of the, I guess, rumblings were, look, there's just so many things that they have to navigate. So many costs now
100%.
that ultimately will also affect land value as well. So I think there's a lot of things going on that are positive, but like you said, there's a lot of ripple effects happening as well because of those. But I guess my standpoint is at least, there's something going on, there's changes being made, that they are trying to push it forward more.
No, agreed.
I think I'd love to cover a little bit, because we did quite a big piece on grey belt.
Yes, that's true. That's another opportunity as well, which is not going to go away. Like, everyone, I think, felt like it was really big last year, but it's going to continue to be big. Yeah,
but I'd love to. There's two things I think would be great to cover, and obviously you were heavily involved in creating that data set. And I think it would be really interesting to sort of go through actually how you did it. And also like maybe a little bit about, there's some things coming on Landstack that could make those processes actually a bit easier.
So we'll talk a bit about that. So obviously on the grey belt side, one of the big unlocks, and it's a buzzword, but there's sort of massive value to it, is AI, right? And the way we built the grey belt data set is, one of the things we've been doing at Landstack is we've been sort of standardizing and processing every single planning application document. So now we have all the documents for each individual planning application, and what that allows you to then do, using large language models and sort of agentic frameworks, essentially to simplify that, you give all the documents to a language model, is you can do sort of like massive processing of lots of planning applications and then pull out important data. And the first thing we focused on was grey belt. We wanted to get an idea for how successful the policy was, whether developers were using it, whether it actually affected outcomes, and maybe when the arguments were being made. And so what we kind of found was that start of the year, obviously people were dipping their toe in, trying to figure out what grey belt sites actually meant. And then as you progress through the year, more and more grey belt applications were getting put in. The one thing we did find is that it wasn't the be all and end all. I think one of the biggest takeaways was that even if you have a grey belt site, a lot of them were still getting refused on other reasons, essentially your classic planning reasons. So that might be viability, it might be issues with conservation areas or other constraints.
I think that's an important point, because I think what a lot of people maybe would have thought is
it's a bit of a golden bullet.
It's just golden bullet. I'm going to get planning. I've called it a grey belt site. Brilliant. But actually, what you saw, what we saw was there's a lot of other factors. It is still taking in the factors of planning. Generally.
Which I think is a good thing. It's a good thing. It shouldn't just be a blanket yes if you're a grey belt site, but it does just mean that it's grey belt's an opportunity, but it's an opportunity in the context of everything else we already know, right? So you will get a grey belt application refused if your BNG doesn't line up. You will get a grey belt application refused if you're adjacent to a conservation area and you don't account for that. It will be refused if you don't have decent access and all those sorts of things. So I think the fundamentals are still there, but it just gives you another quiver in your bow to make an argument to the local authority about why it should be granted. And then equally, obviously, it takes that green belt part of it out if you can have the grey belt argument. So I think it's good policy. I think a lot of people thought it would have a massive boom. I think a lot of people felt like, it would bring a huge amount of sites forward, and I don't think it's delivered on that.
I think it's probably more on the smaller end of sites than the larger applications. But I think from the data we saw, it's obviously definitely being used. And as the year progressed, more and more grey belt sites were appearing. Did we see any, factors that were saying this is what a grey belt site is? Because I think there's a lot that's very ambiguous, the grey belt terminology.
It was. It still is, I think.
Would you say that actually it's not a clear...
No, and I think that's because so much of and this is one of the problems with the planning system, I think, is the government have said this is what a grey belt site is in legislation, and then they've left it to sort of appeals and sort of legal precedents to be set, and some of them are still getting set. And also there's disagreements over decisions that have been made about the fact that this legal interpretation actually isn't correct and it should be this, which, again, just means that it slows things down, right? It almost feels like there's this piece of legislation that we have to then figure out how to interpret in the context of the law, and that whole process takes time and isn't really clear and then doesn't make it that easy. So, one of the big things I would pitch the government, and I know we're kind of getting a bit off topic, but is to try to take that bit out. If you want to have a piece of legislation that really works, you almost need to go, I would say, more the digital route and really clearly define the areas that do and don't meet the criteria that you're talking about, and start there, and then build your policy around that. So then you could actually publish a data set of land that you think is grey belt, right? And that is doable. Like it is very doable. We have the means to do that, especially nowadays. So I think a bit of a rethink there. So in the interest of kind of putting into practice a little bit of what we were talking about then, I thought it would be a good idea to pull up Landstack and use our site finder tool to kind of go into a bit of detail on like some specific examples of sites that potentially would be good to look at 2026.
Do you want to explain a little bit about how the site finder tool works?
Yeah, I think that's sensible. So what we've done on Landstack is essentially we've looked at every single land registry parcel in the UK, and we've put together a data set on each one. So for every single parcel, we know how far it is away from a flood zone. If it's in a flood zone, how much it intersects? Is it close to a listed building? Is it close to a green belt? Is it close to a train station?
Yeah.
Does it have any B8 sort of industrial use on it or not? We've got sort of thousands of different data points for every single title.
Yeah.
And so then what that means you can do is you can basically type in here something basically what you're looking for. So I've said, can you show me sites larger than 2 acres close to a train station?
And I guess the big thing here is, rather than manually looking for where the train stations are, loading the different layers, you can put in a prompt.
Yeah.
And straight away you get a list.
Yes, exactly. So what I might actually do here is I'm going to constrain myself also to a region. So I want to just do the Southwest. So I'm just going to choose that here. But then you're right. Like what you can then do is you can just search that. And the beauty is you can look through these options and also load all the layers on at the same time. So you'll see here, if I scroll down a bit, we've got, 134,000 different titles that match, which is quite a lot.
Yeah.
But you'll see, I was just going to zoom in here. So you'll see it's picked out a number of sites actually just adjacent to Kemble. And you can see these are kind of the sites that we were talking about. And interestingly enough, there's obviously a huge landowner here, Kemble Farms Limited, that own this site to the side. But if I keep that on and I load our layers on, so I'm going to put our call for sites SHLA layer on, and I'm going to put planning apps on, and I'm going to put our constraints layer on, you get a really clear idea. So Cotswolds always is massively constrained by this purple AOMB, or now called National Landscape. And so then if we zoom in, you can see obviously applications that have gone in near Kemble. There's a conservation area to the sort of southeast, and there is a bit of flood zone to the west side of the site.
And so these constraints that you've loaded on, we sort of view those as like the key killers of sites, or can be the key killers of sites.
Yes.
These are things you need to look out for when you're doing your site finding, site sourcing, those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So huge one. Obviously, flood zone is a big one. You can mitigate it. But then also a bit of a flag should be these pink SSSIs here as well.
Yeah.
Now, I think that's an old train track, I want to say, where that is. Through. Yeah, SSI Kemble Railway cuttings. So you'd have to mitigate that. But also, which is important, is that the piece of the site was submitted in call for sites previously. Mm-hmm. So in previous local plan. And if I pull that out.
And just talking a little bit about call for sites, land availability assessment, obviously that's sort of your real first stage of a local plan process, where landowners agents will submit land into a call for sites. Those sites will then get assessed by the council. Yeah. And that is where you get really a wealth of information that you can see on the right-hand side about what they've actually said about the site. Yeah. So is it available? Is it deliverable? Is it suitable? Those sorts of things. And a lot of what's picked up in those are things that we're telling you anyway. You know, it floods, it's in the national landscape, there's a conservation area nearby or crossing the site. But I think that's where, especially when you're looking early on at site identification, and especially if you're looking at sites around railways, you'll need this information when you're actually trying to analyse it a bit more. What have you loaded on?
Sorry, I skipped it whilst you were talking about it. I just read in the SHLA that it's in a special landscape area. Okay. And so just had a look through. Basically, it was refused in the SHLA. Now, I would never treat like a SHLA refusal especially in the long strategic term, as a negative thing. Yeah. I think it's just a signal, one, that the landowner's interested in development, so that's actually almost more of a positive, right? And then two, to understand the exact reasons why it's been negatively assessed. So commonly, especially if you go into Landstack's historic data, you'll be able to see that sites that were refused or sort of negatively assessed in a SHLA were subsequently positively assessed in a subsequent local plan. And so they're often good key signals for development.
And as we've talked about, policy is moving so quickly. Yes, that exactly. Actually, when it's reviewed a year ago, things have changed quite a lot since then. So it's always take it with a slight pinch of salt. Yeah. But the data then, no matter, is useful. Yeah. It's going to tell you a lot of things.
100%. Yeah, and it tells you what you need to worry about on that site in a level of detail that it will spend quite a while for you doing yourself. Yeah. Now, crucially, the key point here is that kind of one of the main things as well is Kemble Station is a listed building, right? But if you put that in sort of opposition to the government's plans, which is to kind of say, look, homes next to train stations should get approved for development.
Yeah.
And the fact that Kemble is so well located from a London point of view, the argument there is really obvious. So you're going to then end up with the local authority having to choose between hitting their housing numbers, agreeing with the government on their train station points versus some of the negative aspects of it. And you've got to think that, obviously, in the context of a local plan and everything, that would work.
Yeah, and I think the idea here, obviously, we've just targeted this in the southwest. We've zoomed into an area in the Cotswolds.
Yeah.
But you could replicate this across the country.
Yes,
and that's the beauty of the data here, is it's standardized. So no matter where you are, you're going to get the same level of detail, and you're going to get the same sort of searches, so same results in the different areas.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And so, the beauty here is that you can, go through here, save a load of sites, and you can end up with sort of 50, 60 opportunities quite easily. And then obviously use that to then talk to some landowners and see if there's any interest for development. So this is kind of a classic example of how to use Landstack alongside the sites that you should be looking at.
Alongside policy.
Yeah, alongside policy as well.
Josh, super excited for this next bit. Yeah. So it's going to be underrated, overrated. We're going to go through developments and just give them basically a score, underrated, overrated. Talk a little bit about them. Hopefully some of these will be ones that are close to home, but we're going to cover kind of all the bases. So do you want to start? Yeah,
so first thing we've got is Canary Wharf. Just quickly, we haven't put this together ourselves. We were given this, so we don't really know what we're going to see. Canary Wharf. This is a really interesting one. I would say potentially historically, I don't know, rated, but I would say nowadays underrated. There's so much that happened, I think, with Canary Wharf that people don't necessarily appreciate. One of the big ones being the LDDC, London Docks Development Corporation, and the way that they kind of looked at it pragmatically and said, if we're going to build something here, it's an opportunity to do something very different. Let's put sort of planning control out of the local authority's hands and create this separate entity which can then push planning through. And they kind of couple that with a lot of the decisions they made about incentivizing planning and putting good incentives there for people. Basically meant that you ended up with obviously one of London's more successful development areas.
I suppose it's become a bit of the financial district.
Yeah, massive financial hub.
What I guess they were going for.
Yeah.
So in that sense,
honestly, hugely positive. And if you look at London, obviously financial crash and all that, but what is its main export? It's financial services. Yeah. And so Canary Wharf played massively into that, and so much of what the government should be doing is more long-term planning, right? They really should be doing more of this when it's in the national interest, and I think it is. This is something that so obviously is a massive positive, and so I'd say massively underrated. I feel like if you asked the random person, no one's going to know what the London Docks Development Corporation is, and if you put that in the context of a lot of what the government was suggesting and the ideas of economic zones and regeneration areas and kind of having specific areas where planning is considered differently, this is a case study for how it can do really well. Yeah. And so again, something that people should consider.
Cool. Underrated.
Nansleydon. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Yeah. So this is was Prince of Wales, now King. This was sort of his flagship development that he did at Newquay. I think I've been there a few times, to be fair. I think we were talking a little bit about that as well. They've got a high street there. They tried to develop in a way like a bit of a it's an urban extension, but it also feels a little bit like a new town sort of vibe. I personally think it's great. Yeah. There's a good mix of affordable housing as well in there, and he's properly pushed that on as his thing. And now I think Prince of Wales now, obviously William is taking that on.
Okay, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And there is more, I think, that they can develop in that area. Yeah. And I think generally, talking about the Crown Estate, I think they do things really well. They obviously are one of the biggest landholders in the country. But in terms of the way they look at it from a strategic point of view, which is kind of everything we're talking about.
Yeah, agreed.
Is they've got a good understanding of what they can do with the different pieces of land they've got.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, honestly, I see it very much, maybe not Garden City, right? But it is like an indication about how well you can sort of structure a development, really think it through, put the infrastructure in you need. The one thing I kind of, whenever I go there, I always think the way they've done the high street right, is really quite interesting, and sort of the way that they've built all that, and also the kind of the look of the houses and the way that they've structured that. I remember speaking to some people in the shops there, and it was also positive about the area. Everyone felt like it was up and coming, and like it was a great place to live, and all this sort of stuff. So if you compare that to sort of like a box development, right? You know, it's a massive contrast.
Yeah, and there's some new settlements in just outside of Exeter. I think one of them was rated the worst for crime in the country.
Right. Yeah.
So I do think it's actually you know, whoever it is behind it.
Yeah.
Has a big influence on how that sort of plays out.
Yeah.
So I think definitely an
huge case study. Yeah, I agree.
2 out of 2.
We're in danger of underrating everything.
Yeah. Well,
HS2.
It's not going to be that difficult.
Yeah. No, well, see, I'm going to go controversial take.
Yeah. Okay.
What do you think?
Well, you go.
Okay. I'm going to say overrated in delivery, but underrated idea. I just think. Let's just put the fact that it cost as much as it did and the absolute crap show that the delivery of it was. The idea, I'm very pro. I think we need to do more infrastructure. I think, you know, case in point is everybody's opinion of the Elizabeth line before and after it was built. It was overran, very expensive. And yet when I go to London, right, it takes me everywhere. Obviously we're in the right place for it, but I go London, Paddington, and then literally I can get anywhere it feels like I can get anywhere on the Lizzie line, and it's so efficient. So HS2 could do that, but more.
But don't you think that the reason maybe it hasn't happened is because actually the planning of it, realistically, couldn't work, cost too much money, couldn't make it work. So surely that's a problem with actually the whole plan of it. Maybe the route, the way they do compulsory purchase.
Yeah, but you have to. Like there is, how can you build a train station from, a train track, from London to Manchester, right? Not there anymore. Without, you have to compulsory purchase, right? So you have to do the compulsory purchase part. Obviously, the key thing for me will be a lot of the cost overruns, the infamous Bat Tunnel, all this sort of stuff, right? I think that is...
obviously, it only goes to Birmingham.
And it only goes to Birmingham,
any further.
Yeah. And like, if we are serious about Northern Powerhouse, if you're serious about trying to improve the whole country, not just London, right, then this is a crucial part of it. You know, people being able to set up a business in Manchester, set up a business in Birmingham, be able to get into London for the things they need to get into London for, but fundamentally be able to run it from Birmingham means that Birmingham as a city becomes better. It means that kind of any towns sort of on the way from Birmingham that have stations can also have massive improvements. Any towns that are close to Birmingham then means you can get from Birmingham to London much more quickly. And again, you know, the Manchester aspect, if you could get from the north of the country to the south of the country incredibly quickly. Like for me, I think people underrate the sort of change that potentially could have.
But it doesn't go any further than Birmingham. So
no.
I'm going overrated.
Fine.
Is where I'm going.
Well, I think I don't disagree on the actual overall score as overrated.
I
think it's a shame, an overrated shame. Clifton Suspension Bridge. This is an interesting one, bit of a throwback.
Back in the day, So Brunel, obviously linking two areas together that otherwise would have taken longer to obviously get from one place to another. That's the whole point of a bridge. Looks great. Bit of a tourist attraction as well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think it looks really pretty.
Don't make bridges like that anymore.
No. I mean, and obviously, I think, gosh, not necessarily going to get my engineering history right, but I want to say it was the largest in the world for its time. When they built it. It was built by Brunel as well. And you know, whenever you drive under the bridge and you kind of see it above you, it is a bit of a spectacle. And obviously the gorge itself is beautiful. So again, this is the sort of infrastructure we used to build. Right. And we should keep building. So I think massive. Well, whether underrated, I'd just say it's rated.
Yeah, but I guess at the time, probably it was underrated.
No, exactly.
But okay.
Worcestershire Parkway.
This one's an interesting one. This kind of goes back to what we're talking about with railway stations and building around railway stations. I think this is kind of your prime example of that done well. It's obviously another train station linking up Worcester with the areas around it, and then also 10,000 homes or even maybe even more coming to the land around it. And that's quite a good picture to show kind of north of that station there. All that land is going to be, building, but it's also going to be open space. It'll be solar, all sorts of things. So I think this is a great example of, I guess, policy coming into place and building around train stations, which is a no-brainer.
No, I think I agree. And it kind of plays into a couple of things for me. It's like so much what the government wanted to do was new towns.
Yeah.
You either have, if you want to build the number of homes you have to build, you've got a choice. You can make the existing towns and cities bigger, or you can build new towns, right? The scale that you need to do it, those are your options.
Yeah.
And so the beauty here is that you've got a train station which is great connectivity, right? It's a hub which has pretty much nothing else around it, and you obviously got the opportunity to basically build a new town.
And I think this is a good. I've had a look at some of the planning plans for it as well, and it is almost like they're doing different towns.
Interesting.
But they've had a look at the whole area, so they've seen where all the current kind of hamlets and villages are, and they've tried to keep it all in keeping with those as well, and then linking them, cycleways, walkways, things like that. I think this is kind of, I think will be a leading example of how you do new towns, garden villages, those sorts of things.
Yeah. Again, so we're saying underrated.
Yeah,
underrated.
That's 4 out of 5 underrated.
Yeah, 4 out of 5 underrated, with an argument
Very
for
positive.
HS2 being underrated, which I don't think you'll get anywhere else.
No.
So fine. Okay. Hey, well, very good. Love that. All right. What we wanted to do as well is look at what the general public and people are talking about with respect to land and planning at this point in time. So we went on the internet, on Reddit and a couple of other sites, and kind of pulled off some questions people have been asking recently.
We'd love some questions from people in the comments.
Yeah.
Fire away anything land planning related.
Yeah.
We'd love those to come through.
Yeah, no, agreed. Okay, so we've put them together. First one is, would it be possible to live off-grid, off the land, in the UK?
Sure.
Go on.
I would say yes, only because I know I've watched many a episode of either Grand Designs or even there's a few people on YouTube I watch as well who live off-grid in cabins.
Yeah.
So they do it.
Yeah, honestly, you definitely can. And there's been, maybe not as recently, but maybe sort of like last 5 years, there was a big push for sort of self-build and like for to relax the legislation on it and allow people to do it. And you can do it. I think it's always easier, especially if you want to go off-grid in the countryside, to start with an existing structure that you can convert rather than building your own.
I feel like you do need a level of money as well, because if you want to buy solar, battery. I think that's the avenue you'd want to go down. But
I think a lot of people would probably think like you'd end up in a caravan for a while whilst you build something. But look, I think there's a couple Grand Design episodes that you mentioned, which probably worth, if you really want to give it a go, have a watch of those. Because some of them are really impressive. Like they properly go all in, grow all their own vegetables, create all their own power, and it looks massively stressful. But it's worth a look.
Possible.
Yeah, definitely possible. Where do people in the UK seek/buy land plots to self-build a house on it and live in it afterwards? I don't need a mansion, just big enough plot to have about 80 square metre, 2-storey house with a small garden and a parking space on it.
So I know, obviously, through planning applications, you can put in for self-build. It can be anything from kind of 1 to many self-builds. So that's always an avenue to look at. Yeah. The thing I'd do there is I'd actually look at the layout of the planning application for those self-builds, see how big the houses are.
There's a huge urban extension in Swindon near where we live, Tadpole Garden Village, and they had, I think, about 20 self-build plots there, maybe 15. And I drove through it because I was curious. I was like, I wonder what these are like when I was visiting someone there. And they were all massive.
Okay.
Quite big. And it looked to me like it was more of a sort of a luxury option to build a luxury house, rather than an option to put in like my sort of small pokey dream home. So that might be the difficult part if you want to go on the planning application self-build route, is that I think
it's kind of set in
plot size and lots of that sort of stuff. But always worth a look there. And then I'd say like the problem you're going to have, I think, if you want to try and do it yourself, so find a small plot of land somewhere and build your own house on it, will always be trying to make it cost effective. So you're going to be competing with the cost of getting a mortgage and building a house yourself versus getting a mortgage and buying a house versus building it yourself, because lending the money, if you need to lend the money to build it, which obviously you will need to do, and because if you have a crap load of money, you'll just build a house anyway, right? So that's the difficult bit, right? Because you need to buy the land, you'll need to get the planning.
Yeah, I think that there are options of obviously looking at barn conversions.
Yeah,
because there's ways to get obviously around the planning there. Derelict houses that you could knock down and
absolutely,
then build afterwards.
Yeah.
So that there'd be avenues there, I think, that you could
and I mean, again, actually, I would say it depends on where in the UK you're going.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
because if you're London, southeast,
pick
no chance.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you are
Wales,
maybe even more northerly, like it's probably actually quite realistic. Yeah. When we were in, we were up north in, where were we? Near Beverley.
Yeah.
And there was quite a lot of houses there actually, which just were kind of in and around the town where one was run down, and you must be able to kind of find out who owns it, approach them and build on it. So, I think it depends where you are.
Use Landstack to find out who owns the.
Exactly. Yeah, you can use Landstack to do that for free. So actually, that is a good point. It's a really good place to start looking, and you could obviously look for planning applications similar to what you've done.
Subtle plug.
Yeah. Why are there so many nonsense plots of land for sale in the UK? On Rightmove, there are hundreds of completely unusable bits of land for sale, land that cannot be developed or lived on. I assume there's some legal fandangles going on, but I can't fathom them.
I guess not everything is being sold for development in a lot of cases. A lot of landowners maybe have some land and they're actually just going, let's see if there's interest in, woodland being sold, even just like a small part of farmland being sold.
Yeah.
So it's not, I guess it's not all from a point of view of trying to make loads of money from it. There are so many different uses you can have for land nowadays.
Yeah. And I think so much of it as well is, let's say you own a piece of land. The land market's interesting because on the small side of the spectrum, it's just harder to find the person who would want to develop it.
Yeah.
And so generally speaking, if I owned a piece of land, it wasn't big enough to approach sort of large scale developer. What are you going to do? Often, if you don't know what you're doing, you'd get an agent instructed, and that agent would kind of give you some advice, but they would say, look, put it to the market, right? Advertise it and see what you can do. Now, what they're saying here is nonsense plots. The reality is a nonsense plot's only a nonsense plot if no one wants it. Yeah. And the only, if you put it on Rightmove, it's not just for development. It can be for anything else. So it's basically just someone saying, look, I want to sell this piece of land. Does anybody want to buy it?
Yeah.
And for a purpose and so on. So, I think the assumption that it's kind of a legal fandangle or something I don't think it's probably likely. I think it's just someone who wants to sell a piece of land.
And there's also BNG, you now could be a plot in the middle of nowhere and still be of value. Yeah. So there's loads of different things you could look out for there.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
Yeah. Should we extend Britain with man-made land? This started as a joke, but I'm thinking, well, it's been done in Dubai and China to some extent, and as an island, the edges are constantly hit with waves. So what if we built man-made structures attached to some of the less touristy coasts to give us more room to house our ever-growing population? Naturally, the process of building makes jobs too. Could it be done? Where would it be done? Who gets to live on it?
Oof.
I think I'm obviously a bit of a joke, but I did see a post about a bit of land called Doggerland, which is off the east.
Good name.
Yeah, off the east of England, which historically speaking used to be a connection, used to be a land bridge between England and Europe, and then the ice melted. East coast of England, and then ice caps melted, and there was big raise in sea level, and then it obviously got flooded.
Yeah.
But it's quite, in terms of if you look at the seabed, it's quite high up.
Yeah.
Right. So I saw someone put together like a pitch that you could get like the Netherlands, who do a lot of this, the UK and some other people who are in and around the area, and they could kind of like build an island there.
100%. I think doable. I think we should definitely look at doing this.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting one, right?
If Dubai can do it.
Yeah.
That they've shown that it's doable.
No, I mean, yeah. I think, look, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Obviously, it's like who would want to live there?
I mean, I'd give it a go.
Would you give it a go? Yeah. Interesting one. Not for me, but, maybe.
Yeah, local dogger.
Yeah. How easy is it to get planning permission for rural land in the UK? Supposing you and your friends wanted to pool your money together and buy a bit of rural land so you don't have to pay rent anymore, how difficult would it be to get planning permission to connect utilities and erect a bunch of prefab cabins? What about tents and caravans?
Well, okay. So it's a good...
I'd say your biggest problem there will be getting the planning.
Yeah.
it'll be you'd have to find somewhere where people won't object to that.
And also, like, you'll struggle to have that all year round, even if you do get some form of.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, you can have a tent here for 2 months of the year or something.
Yeah,
that'll be the other issue. I think there's a lot of hoops you're going to need to jump through.
The key bit they're saying is rural land.
Yeah.
So and then that's the problem, right? If you want to get less objections, you would kind of go away from settlements. As soon as you go away from settlements, then getting all your utilities in is way more expensive. Yeah. So and one of the big problems is it's really hard to know where all the utilities are at the moment. You know, there is some work being done to digitize all that, but that's also a massive pain. So it would be really difficult, but it's like theoretically doable.
Yeah.
Getting the permission from the local authority would be probably the hardest bit.
Well, that's the trick. You kind of maybe you try and avoid the council, and you just
do it
in the middle of nowhere. No one can see it. You build a load of hedges around it.
Yeah.
It's the I think that's what you do.
Tough one, that one. I'd say very hard. Well, that was the last question. So what we're looking for really is if anyone's interested, they can drop a question in the comments. It can kind of be anything land and planning. We'd love to tackle any question, and then we'll probably give it a go in the next episode. Kind of have a go through it. So if you're interested, please do that. Just let us know. All right, in the interest of keeping things brief, we'll probably end the first episode there.
Difficult to keep you brief.
Yeah, very, very true, very true. That's why we're cutting it off. We're going to hopefully getting these out kind of once a month.
Yeah.
So drop your sort of questions in the comments and feedback in the comments. We'd love topics to talk about, specific issues that you're interested in hearing about. We want this to be kind of really information dense and hopefully fairly short with a little bit of light entertainment as well. So we'd love any feedback that anyone has. What would you kind of say is a bit of a takeaway from this episode?
Yeah, I would say main things are policies are changing so frequently.
Yeah.
And trying to keep your kind of finger on the pulse of land and planning is difficult just with how quick everything's moving.
Absolutely.
So it's keeping up to date with the different policies. We're trying hard to obviously keep everyone on Landstack updated with things that are going on.
Yeah.
So I would just say that's the main sort of takeaway is understand maybe a little bit of the nuance of what's coming out from government.
Yeah.
And then understanding where things are going in the future.
Yeah.
So I think we've talked about a lot about it today.
Yeah.
Railway stations being maybe one of the key things that's talked about a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think just keeping your finger on the pulse of
exactly,
policies.
and then also take it with a pinch of salt. So it's important to see what the legislation is coming through, but there will, I think, maybe don't necessarily make that the be all and end all.
Yeah.
There is the fundamental bread and butter of land and planning, and good sites will always be good sites. So always keep your ears and sort of eyes out for decent sites. I think that could probably be my takeaway. I think it's been great though. Good first episode.
Yeah.
We've got a lot in the pipeline as well. Yeah. So we've got an interesting episode 2 already lined up, which you'll hopefully see a bit more of in the future. So looking forward to that. And lots from Landstack. Obviously, this is a podcast on the built from Landstack. So if you're interested in anything land, our recommendation would be to head to landstack.co.uk. You can sign up for Landstack Lite for free, which we've used in today's episode to kind of talk about all the different sites. So just go send an email to support@landstack.co.uk if you'd like to sign up.
And I'd also say definitely like, comment and subscribe. We'd love to see that people are listening, people are watching.
Yeah.
We want to do more of these, so that would be a great indicator as well. So drop a comment below.
Great. Thanks for listening, everyone.